Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 21, Superstition. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happens within this episode. So, as always, we'll start with the patients. We, of course, still have Denny, who has a clot now in his heart and so had to go into surgery with Bert, who unfortunately wasn't able to get the clot through minimal invasive procedures and so has to reopen the chest cavity. But Denny does end up pulling through. Then we have Ollie, who is a sponsor for AA. And it turns out she was previously Richard's sponsor, and we learn that he had trouble with substances in the past and has been sober 17 years. And he personally does the operation on Ollie, who has cirrhosis of the liver due to her own substance abuses in her past and is waiting for a liver. But while she was waiting for a liver, the liver issue caused backups of blood to her esophagus that kept rupturing, causing her to spit up blood. And Richard's procedure is meant to stopgap that until such a time as she can get a new liver. Third patient was a man who suffered from severe OCD, and he ended up getting rear-ended because he was sitting at a green light because he didn't feel like he could move until his blinker had blinked a certain number of times, and he unfortunately dies on the table. Then we had final patient was a woman who was stalking her ex-boyfriend, climbed a tree in a thunderstorm. The tree was struck by lightning. She ended up falling off of the tree. Her bone was set fine, but she did have a ruptured spleen that was bleeding into her body, but she refused to get surgery because her horoscope was bad that day, and she took the lightning striking the tree as a sign that she was meant to have a very bad day, as her horoscope had implied, and so she refused to have a surgery until midnight. Unfortunately, she ended up bleeding out before then, which was a fatality. The episode as a whole was started by 4 fatalities, as it was said that they happen in clusters of 3 or 7 as a superstition, and we know of 6, though it is stated that there was a 7th, but that 7th was not featured in the episode. Drama-wise, we had Addison getting in on the friendship with Derek and Meredith because she's married to Derek. She feels like if Derek's going to be Meredith's friend, she has to try to be Meredith's friend. And Meredith talks to Christina about it, asking whether or not she has to be her friend too because she's Derek's wife. And things were up in the air, but by the end of the episode, they are greeting each other, and she does end up drinking the Juju hot chocolate that Addison brings her at the end of the episode, which she did not do at the middle of the episode, so progress potentially there. Um, because the episode is superstition themed, we see some of the attendings and their various superstitions. Addison has to have her pens in a certain way in her pocket. Burke has special scrub caps. And then, of course, Derek has the fairy scrub cap, as well as his "It's a wonderful day to save lives" or "Wonderful morning to save lives" little catchphrase that he does as his superstition. Bailey kind of takes a moment of silence before her operations. There's also a saga kind of going on in the background of Christina wants George out of the apartment, but Burke isn't wanting to kick him out, and so she holds one of his scrub caps hostage throughout the episode to try to basically make him kick out George. Izzy, however, finds out, and as Burke is the one doing the operation on Denny, she threatens Christina trailer park style because she grew up in a trailer park, and basically says you give him the scrub cap because Denny's not going to be one of the 7. And so Christina does end up giving the scrub cap, but make sure when she does so to tell Burke that he doesn't need it and that he is a great surgeon, even if he doesn't have a scrub cap that is his own. And he gives it back to her at the end of the episode. George almost gets kicked out because by the end of the episode, Burke is willing to kick him out for Christina. However, she then says not tonight because Izzy has very far fallen for Denny. She was still keeping up her friends with benefits sort of casual relationship with Alex. However, she officially breaks up with him when he reveals that he thinks Denny's going to die and she can't handle it. After Denny's operation, when he does wake up, she does kiss him, so she is all in on the Denny right now. The breakup with Alex is official, and Alex takes out some of his aggression and anger over losing Izzy, who he had liked, on George by kind of basically saying the reason he's moping around and won't forgive Meredith is that he's not over Meredith and that he's being a baby and he's not a man, blah, blah, blah. But this does give George the push he needs to go ahead and finally call Callie, who at this point was saying that the boat had sailed. But when he calls her at the end of the episode, she does smile when he calls her on the phone, even though she's like right nearby. And implications are that she is going to say yes to go out with him. And I believe that is all the drama that happened in this episode. So that now brings us to the rankings, and we will rank on our mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking, which now brings us to our mostly objective ranking so far. And as always, when more than one episode has the same score, we rank in episode order, and there have been quite a few 10, 9, and 8, so even though it got an 8 out of 10, it is pretty far down our list, so we'll start with Make Me Lose Control, Into You Like a Train, Bring the Pain, Tell Me Sweet Little Lies, Break On Through, As We Know It, What Have I Done to Deserve This, Deny, 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 Thanks for the Memories, It's the End of the World, Enough is Enough, Something to Talk About, Let It Be, Much Too Much, Yesterday. This episode is all the way down at 16, Superstition, followed by Bring the Pain, Band-Aid Covers the Bullet Hole, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, Owner of a Lonely Heart, and then, in last so far, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. For my personal ranking, well, there are things to say. However, I did say most of them in the mostly objective ranking, and also specifically in the honorable mentions. So, I did like the patients. I did feel a little bit of pity for the OCD patient, which eliciting any sort of emotion from me is pretty rare, so I think that deserves a mention. Um, I did find Nikki entertaining, and it was very obvious that she was stalking, because why would you go to your boyfriend's house and then climb up a tree in his backyard during a thunderstorm when he wasn't even there if you were in a actual relationship? So there was that. Unfortunately, she did end up dying, and as Bailey had predicted, she basically killed herself while trying not to die because she was trying not to die by following her horoscope, which had bad luck for the day, so not have an operation. However, it was the operation she needed to save her life, and as a result of not getting the operation, she does end up passing away. I did find that obviously because of the theme of the episode, there was a lot of patients passing away, and 2 out of the 4 feature patients of the episode ended up dying, which, you know, is rare. Like they have died before, but it is usually a little bit more on the rare side. But because of the theming of the episode, it also was kind of anticipated that there would be some who died. And like I said, I have no problem with the ethics of Denny and Izzy being in a relationship or falling in love. What I have a problem with is Izzy not excusing herself from that case and visiting the hospital like in her off hours or on her lunch break to be with Denny versus being his doctor because I feel like she's too emotionally attached. And I mentioned this in the previous episode, but anybody who has watched the series before would be aware of where exactly this emotional involvement and attachment leads. And the early signs of it are here way back in this episode, and yet nobody is doing anything about it, not even the attendings, not the other interns, not Izzy herself. No one is trying to have her take a step back, and they really should be. And I feel like it's a big oversight on the part of those involved. Meredith and George still not talking, but that's again George being petty, and again, that's why Alex ends up kind of getting mad at him in the end, because it's like you've been moping around for quite a bit of time. Everybody has poor sexual experiences or makes bad sexual decisions. That's kind of normal for some people. Not everybody, not all of us, but some people do make those types of decisions. It's fairly common, and so much like Alex says, like he's kind of overreacting, and at this point I completely agree there. He does go about saying it in a very bad way, but I agree. It's kind of getting annoying at this point. It's like, yes, you loved her, but you knew she didn't love you back. You approached her when she was emotionally vulnerable. Because she was emotionally vulnerable, she made a bad choice. Yes, you're embarrassed about it, but that doesn't mean you go for like months and months or weeks and weeks or days and days without talking to that person. And sure, maybe you end the friendship, but you are still professional. So at least in a professional capacity, you should be able to communicate with your coworker at the very least. And I was getting annoyed by it too, but then I'm not a fan of George the character, so of course I was annoyed by it. Basically, I didn't hate the episode. I liked the theming of the episode around superstitions, the superstitions that we were introduced to that each of the attendings kind of had, and Bailey. I like that we learned a little bit more about Richard's past. Um, I like that, again, the theming. I liked both of the patients that passed away, but it does have its flaws, and I feel like they are kind of carryover flaws. At least one of them is going to be a carryover flaw, but nothing you can do about that. I decided to score it a 5 out of 10, gave it an average score, and so that brings us to our personal ranking list so far, which is in first, As We Know It. It's the End of the World. Make Me Lose Control. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. Something to Talk About. Into You Like a Train. Break On Through. Deny, Deny, Deny. Let It Be. Tell Me Sweet Little Lies. Begin the Begin. Thanks for the Memories. Much Too Much. Yesterday. Superstition. Enough is Enough. Bring the Pain in 17th. Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. What Have I Done to Deserve This? Owner of a Lonely Heart. I cannot read today. Band-Aid Covers the Bullet Hole. Which brings us now finally to our final segment, which is the series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, Season 1 has a score of 77.78, and Season 2 so far has a score of 164 out of 270. Personal side, Season 1 ended with 66.67%, and Season 2 so far has a score of 143 out of 270. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 21, Superstition. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.